but we're just happy to see you here this week. I know Layla won't be here this week, so I actually think this is our full group because normally we would be 10 with Layla. So I think we can get started, Allison, and we can see your beautiful face again. Yay!
Hey, so good morning, everybody. And just like last week, I really enjoy hearing your voices. So when I count to 3, can everybody please unmute and say good morning to each other and Sarah and I? All right, 1, 2, 3.
Good morning.
Oh, I love it. Okay, sense of normalcy, right? You all, it's so good to see your faces, and I'm just so excited where we're going with these classes. I'm feeling more connected with you every week, so it is just wonderful to see you all. And I hope you guys had a good week. Give me a thumbs up if everybody had a good week, good weekend. You did some fun stuff. Cool. So does everybody have, before we get started, let's make sure we have everything. Give me a thumbs up if you have your homework assignment somewhere near you with you. We'll be sharing those. Anyone need to go get that? I'm having Sarah help me look. Everybody looks good? All right. Okay. And does everybody have some paper, pencils for our lesson after? All right, does anybody need to go get any of that? We good to go. Jonathan, you're a Pokemon. I love it. Okay, so if you have your cameras, if you can turn them on, that's just helpful so we can see your faces. And is anybody ready to kind of share? So let's, before we do that, let me actually give you guys some prompts so we kind of know what to share from our models. So you may have a different model, or you may have worked off of your same model, and we're going to talk about human impacts with these models, and you guys were going to list a few more human impacts and some of the things of the ways the land has changed through people, and some of the new developments of urbanization, as we call it. So what I'd like you to do is show me your model and kind of point out some of the big changes that you incorporated. So what made it personal to you? I really want to see kind of your personal touch on these models. I want to start off by saying I was so blown away with what you guys made last week. I've just been excited all week to see your models and things that you've created this week. And Faith, if there's anything when we do get to you that you want to share some of your experiences, just please feel free to share that. And so we're definitely wanting everyone to share today. So what I'd like to do is, again, kind of think about those few things you want to share with your models on what was the most influential for you from your learning, from what you learned after class, anything. I just want to see some critical thinking going on when you share those. And if you feel ready, because we're going to do popcorn style as always, I want to spend a good chunk of time. So I've set a good 20 minutes or so of class to really spend time so you guys can look at each other's models and we can really dive into these, because that's where the learning happens. So who would like to start us off? So Faith, I have you here on the screen with your hand raised. So go ahead and just talk to us about some of the things that you found interesting and learned and what you like to work on in the future.
Okay, let me see. Can you see my, I don't know.
Yes.
Am I holding the camera? Okay, so this is my model, and I pulled it together. So we had an old tub of kinetic sand. So I used that for like the ground, and then I used the bubble wrap to make the twisting river in the water. And I used shrubs off of our pine trees to make trees for the model. And then I used those little poisonous, they can be poisonous, but they're like they look like bananas. Do you know what I'm talking about? And they hang on the trees. Let me get one.
Naomi says she knows what you're talking about. Oh, okay. All right.
I use those for, I'm throwing them now, for plants along the water. And then the nice personal touch I like is the birds, because they're actually clothespin birds, and they're figurines, and they used to belong to my great grandma.
Oh, so such a personal connection that you laid out there. I
I
love
didn't
it.
know we had them until I started doing this. I'm like, oh,
Oh, Faith, can I ask a question?
yeah.
Since I wasn't able to see you last week, I'm just curious, why did you choose something poisonous? Was there a connection or a reason, or just kind of the
No,
way that they
Grace,
felt? Tell me.
I'm like, Grace, do you want to help me with this finding stuff to build this? And she's like, sure. Grace is my little sister. But we went out there and she's like, well, this kind of, because I was trying to find something that resembled a cattail or something, and we didn't have much that resembled a cattail. So she's like, will these work? And I'm like, sure. But also when I was little, we used to leave them whole, and me and my cousins, and we would all go out there and we would play with them and pick them off the trees.
So you really brought in a lot of personal connections there, right? You brought in family experience. You brought in your sister, trying to make connections to what's similar to a cattail because we don't have one near us. So there's critical thinking going on. Did you have fun? It looks like you had a lot of fun.
I did have fun.
Oh, wonderful. Well, it's beautiful. So you keep working on it though, okay? So yeah, some of the things, I don't know, have you watched the last video yet, or you for the Rio Bravo part 2, have you listened to that yet?
No.
Okay, so over the next week, if you have time, that'll help kind of show you, and then if you hear everybody share out, you can kind of hear some of the things to add to your model, because we're gonna make it even more spectacular. So it's amazing. I love it. Anything else you want to share before we pass it on?
I think that's it.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Faith. Did you want some help on calling on someone else?
Popcorn Jonathan.
Jonathan. All right. You're up, dude.
Hold on. Can you see it?
I can, yes. And I remember it from last week, but I see some changes here. Talk to me.
Yeah, we kind of like removed some of the trees and cut them in half to make them little stumps. And we add a trash can with the bear. And we added like a house.
Oh, I see it now. I was like, is that water coming out? But that's his little tail.
It's totally a bear's tushy. I love it.
Wait, honestly. Oh wow. And what other elements kind of stuck out that you changed here?
We thought it was a good idea to kind of like make some wood piles everywhere to make it look like the trees were actually cut down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wow. Okay, so not only did you cut the trees down, but you made it look more real by showing that they leave wood, that the trees don't just get cut down and then they don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
You added that. Mm-hmm. Can I ask what that Lego thing behind the bear is? I think I know what it is, but
Just like a little shed. We thought that would be a good idea.
mm-hmm. So you have infrastructure.
Yeah.
What kind of stood out for you as what is going to affect the changing land the most from the first model?
Like how like we're leaving like trash cans and trash everywhere, so like the bears are gonna start targeting the trash instead of eating like the fish and stuff in the lake.
Mm-hmm. So the bears have a more easily convenient way to get food.
So they're gonna stop eating the fish, and the lake's gonna get really overpopulated with fish.
Yeah. Wow. So you just showed a kind of ripple effect. So not only are we changing the bear's diet, but our river is changing with the amount of fish and the type of fish that are in it. Wow. Awesome. Anything else you want to share before you popcorn it off?
Nothing really. I think that's pretty much all.
And you worked with, who did you work with on this?
I worked
Me.
with Ayana.
Okay, do you want to say something about your, I'm gonna popcorn to you.
Yeah, we also added a car, and
Oh yeah.
that is a house there, and the thing along the water river is a bridge. We kind of made it seem like the human just came in and just changed everything, made some new stuff, and chopped down some trees, just made a whole new environment for the animals. So that's
Wow.
Mhm.
I really like you guys to take a photo of this, and if you can send it to Sarah and I, we would love to see the before and after. And if you guys, one thing I think I'll have you guys do as well, which I hadn't mentioned yet, is kind of list in writing some of those main changes that you did. So not only do we have the visual, but we have that written component too. And that goes for all of us as well. So when folks are looking at the changes, they can really see them because we'll have written them down too. So if you guys can add one more step to your homework for the next week, just to add some of those big steps in writing, that would be great. Well, thank you so much, you guys. This is amazing. Really awesome, good work. Who would you like to popcorn it off to? You're welcome.
I'll popcorn to Audrey.
All right, Audrey, you're up.
Okay. Again, I'm gonna go get it real quick.
Oh goodness, I think of mom right now. It's in your living room, right?
Yes.
All right. Oh my goodness. There it is.
Okay.
Cool. Yes, I remember this one.
So,
Wow, look at that house. Okay, so talk to me.
okay. So some of the big changes, I think would be the assiduous.
Sakias?
That's- Yeah, that just kind of took over a lot of the land. The house, yeah, and then the farmland. And because of all these people moving in, the prairie dog moved out, so we don't have one anymore in this area.
So we have a loss of species.
Yeah.
So the first one, Jonathan, we had a gain, right, of fish, and then now we're seeing a loss.
Yeah. Let's see.
Audrey, how did you make that house? Because it's pretty amazing.
So I just made like a little cardboard box, cut out the holes, and then I just covered it with mud.
Well, you did a good job. It's pretty cool. Even my kids are like, I want to see. So you can see they're popping over my shoulder to see too.
Even though you used natural materials like the dirt and the rocks and the wood, which is what would have been used, how is it changing the land? How did it change the land where you put it?
Yeah, it's cutting down trees, and so there's less habitat for animals like birds and owls.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what else?
It's taking up land that other animals were using before.
Mhm.
So if they, I don't know, like if they had a home in the area, they can't get to it now, and so they have to like move away or find a whole new spot.
Mhm.
And if it's a prey, then the predators also have to move and
Mhm.
you know.
Mhm. Okay, so we have two things going on here that you mentioned. Just to reiterate what I'm hearing, we have habitat loss and we have loss of species. So we have habitat loss and movement. So those are kind of two different things, right? So we're moving habitat and we may be losing habitat because of that. And then we're also losing species at the same time because we're taking things away from them. So I really see kind of like a huge sense of change, and what I want to use the word habitat fragmentation. So fragmenting where our wildlife can live now versus more freely. Anything else? This is amazing.
Yeah. One of the kind of things I thought was cool is that the trees were cut down. I mean, that's not cool, but when I pulled them out, they left like little stump looking things.
Like it's like a reminder, right? That there was a tree here and there was life.
Yeah. And then the trees in the upland, here we go. The trees in the upland, the Siberian elm and the Russian olive are kind of like in the uplands to show that they're kind of like spreading over the land. They're taking over.
You're taking over. Yeah. And we still see that today, don't we?
Yeah.
Yep. So we also have that. So that's another theme that you introduced was species taking over. So loss of species, and then kind of back to what Jonathan mentioned, we have an influx of species. We have species taking over. So another kind of critical thinking component going on. Wow, really awesome job. Okay, I'm going to have you popcorn it off to the next student.
Okay. Naomi?
Okay.
Naomi.
Let's see if I can get my camera to face my model. Because it's a little small on the small side.
Oh, there we go. Oh, there
it is. There we go. So as you can see, like first, it's supposed to kind of look like the first model in the way like there was to what are they called? Cottonwoods over there, but they've been cut down.
They're
So
gone.
they're no longer there, and lots of the plants are gone because this guy over here has kind of destroyed them all. Something I've noticed, I don't know how clean the like real ground was before people were here, but my little sister, when I was making the model, originally had all the water like really pretty and blue. She's like, isn't it like really dirty and muddy? So I had colored in some brown because the water in the river is actually really gross. As you can see, there's some litter, and it's kind of like killing the animals because they are not supposed to eat litter, even though, but it's all around the place, so they don't know any better. The guy, there's some dams built, so it like prevents the natural flooding of the river, and he has the canal to feed to his crops. And in the old model, there used to be like a grassy meadow over here, but most of the grass has been eaten from like the guy's farm animals, so there's not as much for all the other native and natural animals from that habitat. And also, since like the water is dirty, you guys had said like the cattails, they need like cleaner water to live, so they're kind of wilting now because it's not as clean.
So you hit on something too, really quick. I want to kind of mention to the group so we don't forget it, overgrazing, which is another important component to what's happening here, which is something we didn't talk about. So you guys are really incorporating new things when animals are in one spot and then they eat everything, right? So that's really awesome. Naomi, I wanted to just give you some props for bringing in that term for us.
Thanks.
I wanted to mention something to Naomi last week. I thought at first that your pop-up card was like printed little animals that you found, and then I realized that you drew all of them, and then your mom sent me another drawing that you did, and you're a phenomenal artist. So I want to give you credit where credit is due, because I know it took a long time to draw all of these individual things. So good job on this. I love your acequia too. At first glance, I don't see all the details, and then I start looking at every little section of your diagram, and it's, really all encompassing. I think you've done a good job.
Thanks. I've also put like the guy added his made fire, of course, to stay warm, as we can learn as we've learned, fire can cause lots of problems, including air pollution, like killing some of the animals or making them leave. And he's also brought in like an invasive species with him, a musk thistle. I think that's what that one was called. And it's an invasive species in New Mexico. And yeah, that's basically it.
Wow. So what is your kind of big takeaway from all of these changes that you added as you were putting this in? What were you kind of feeling?
That was a lot, like it was a lot prettier, more colorful, and diverse before like people came. Now it's all kind of like dulled out and a lot more sad looking. I don't know.
Well, today we're going to kind of look at something called forest health. And so we're going to kind of think about, because we do see a lot of sadness in these changes, as you guys were noticing that with your models. There's a lot of emotion going on. Did you guys feel emotional a little bit when you had to cut those trees down? Like, ooh, I know I did when I first made these, because I've made these models too. And so kind of cutting those trees down, it kind of just hits you on a level. But it's not all bad. And so you guys are going to kind of watch a video today that's going to kind of show some of those positive things and how we can take where we are now into the future. And so it's going to be this nice kind of bridge and stepping stone. All right, Naomi, let me have you popcorn our next individual.
Popcorn Shay.
Hello. Here's mine. Nothing really changed except the trees. And I added a levee. And there's a little house. And I made a dam. And I noticed when the trees are gone, trees produce air, so the air is just gonna catch
Wow. Oh my goodness. There's so much going on here. So tell me how you made some of the materials you used to make some of these new changes here.
Well, I just made this out of cardboard, and the levee is made out of paper mache. I didn't get the paper.
That's amazing. But I love the levees. So cool. And the house too?
Yeah, that's made out of paper mache too.
Wow. Oh my
A lot of
goodness.
the animals are gone. Like I had a squirrel and an owl that had the trees. They were living in the trees, and they're gone now.
Then they're gone. Yeah, I've like noticed that like you have removed a lot of the vegetation and things, and that was definitely purposefully done, I see. So
Yeah.
kind of tell me your reactions and thoughts as you were adding these levees in and putting all the detail into the levees versus the river that you did the first time.
I was just thinking how people just can take over land and do whatever they want.
Mm-hmm. Do we still see that today?
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're kind of bringing up another point, which is around the word regulation. How do we regulate some of these new things that we see that are happening? Because before there was no regulation, which allowed these levees to go in quickly, which allowed our vegetation to change from cottonwood trees to Russian olives, right? So we kind of see there was no regulation. So how does that play a role going forward?
It's just gonna mess up the whole earth. Everything's gonna be off balance.
Mm-hmm. And the nice thing is you guys are our stewards for the future, and we're living through this right now. This is happening right now, today, right? This isn't yesterday's problem. This is today's problem. And you guys are highlighting it up front and center. And you're showing how the differences affect habitats, how they affect different places differently. We're having less of things, more of things. We're having overgrazing. We're having all kinds of new things that are happening because we're not focused on how different the land has actually changed, and you guys are showcasing it. So I just want us to be aware of the magnitude of what these models represent, because they represent a lot. Thank you so much, Shea. I'm going to now, let's see, Jackson, are you our last one? Yes, I see Sarah nodding. Okay, Jackson, I'm gonna popcorn you.
Right.
Whoa, there we go.
This so that my computer doesn't fall off the table. There. Can you see that?
Yes, we can see it.
All right, so right here I have the mandala with different rings for each of like the different things. So you have the river here in the middle, then the cattail ring, then the riverbank, which is right here where I put some sands that I actually got from the Bosque when I went there this weekend. And then there is a like grassy meadow area, then an upland shrubs, then a second grassy meadow. I mean, not an upland shrubs, a cottonwood. And then the upland shrubs is this farthest ring. And this is a little acequia I did coming from the ring down to here, where there's a little farmer guy and a farm and his house. And then in here, I drew different animals for the different rings, because you have like little silvery minnows, and then you have a red-eared slider and a mallard duck. I didn't do like the full animal or the full drawing. Instead, I did like a representation of that animal. So for great blue herons, I did their beaks. And for red-winged blackbirds, I did a few blackbird wings. These are dragonflies fluttering around, and then there's a cattail right here. These are bullfrogs. And then I also have a little snag right here.
Wow, Jackson, I want to say, and I want to comment first off, it's neat to see that you kind of took an abstract, kind of looking from the outside in. So we have kind of a different perspective where you are looking up and looking in on the changes. And that's kind of how I see that your mind went when you were creating this. You kind of were taking like, you were sitting above everything, you know, and kind of soaking it all in. And then drawing it in a way where you're showing so many different themes happening and being combined into like a bunch of like a whirlwind, kind of how you showed us why you did the circle. So I just want to comment on that. What else, Jackson? Is there anything that when you were making this, how were you feeling and thinking, and what were some of the big emotions, I guess, that went through your head?
About the silvery minnows here, because for them to live, they have to have flooding, because the river floods over into smaller canals, and that's where the silvery minnows live. But because we have dams and things to prevent flooding, now they don't have a habitat really.
Yeah. So yeah, we see that habitat loss, right? Again. So in this whole picture, and Jackson, you can answer this because we're on your model. Who is gaining the most? What species? Yes. Yes. And so the gains, no matter how we look at it, are for us. And so our forward shifting thinking is now going to be going from us back to the wildlife. And that forward shifting thinking needs to happen, or it's going to be continue to focus on us, right? Jackson, I still have you as my main screen. So, but that's for all of us. And so we are now moving to thinking about the changes we've made and looking at them from an all-encompassing position, which you all did today, to thinking about the solution. So we're going to be looking and thinking about solutions. And I just want to reiterate my thanks for all of these models. You guys could show these off in a museum, and you could really get a group of adults to sit and really take in some of these big concepts that you all shared with us today. And I'm going to give it to Sarah for a minute just to see if she wants to comment on some of the things that she saw today.
No, I'm just gonna echo you. I think you guys are amazing. I mean, as Allison said that, I was like, where could we show these awesome models? Like, I wonder if we could get them in front of some other people, because I think you guys have put a lot of hard work and effort into not only creating, because obviously you're all very creative, but the thoughts that have come behind it, things that Allison hasn't even really brought to your forefront, you've thought about, you've naturally gone there. And so I think it's quite intriguing to see how brilliant you guys all are, and I'd love to be able to highlight it. So with that said, I may work to see if we can find a place, if you guys are willing to show off your actual models, but in the meantime, send us pictures. Like, if you are okay with us highlighting you and sharing it out, I really want to get this sent out kind of big. I really want to be able to show people across the state the amazing work that you guys are doing. So take pictures and send them to us, okay?
And give us a write-up.
Yeah,
right.
and if you have pictures from last week before you made these changes for this week, send us those too. And just, I mean, you don't actually have to tell me which one is which, because I'll obviously be able to tell, but send me whatever you guys have, because I want to be able to, you know, raise you guys up for doing the amazing work you've done.
And we will talk about the prizes for next week. We're going to have a meeting tomorrow, Sarah and I and Fiona, and we're going to talk about next steps. So don't worry, you guys, that is on the up front and center, but we're not quite done yet. There's still a last piece. And so that's what we're going to kind of set the stage for today. So I only have, unfortunately, a few minutes left with you guys. And so Sarah's going to finish you guys off with the film, and you'll be taking notes, doing the same thing. And again, we're going to be looking at forest health. So you guys are going to be writing terms down and thinking about moving forward. So now we see what's happening, we see the impacts. What do we do? And that's where we're at today. So let me have you guys, before we do that, while I still have you, get your notebooks out. So put your, if you need to kind of set your models so you don't bump into them, this is the time to kind of set those aside. And I'd like you guys to now get out your journals and notebooks, and we're going to label this one forest health. So I'll put that in the chat. And we're going to be thinking about some of these problems and solutions. So I'm going to write problems and solutions here, and I'd like you guys to write that underneath your title. So I want you to now, in your books, before you watch the movie, write down 2 problems. I know you focused on one last time, and you can still focus on that one if you still feel strongly about that one that you circled. So I want you to think about 2 problems. Oh, you could write a word, a sentence, and then I want you to think about solutions to each of those problems. So what are the immediate solutions that are feasible? So don't think of, well, the biggest solution is if nobody littered, we would be great. Well, that's a nice fantasy, but we know that's not true. So I want you to think about feasible things you can do in your community, things that are on the ground that can actually happen for these problems. Because the big one is solutions. So I want you to list 2 problems, and then I want you to list some of the solutions that you can think of to those problems in the next couple minutes. Okay, and Sarah, you have the video, yes?
I do have the video.
I could put it in the chat.
Nope,
Okay.
I have it perfectly fine. I have it up and ready.
Okay.
The only thing I didn't know if you want to talk about before you leave, what homework you want them to work on before you dig out. Or if you want me to.
Yes, and we will probably send out on Monday after we talk with Fiona a little bit more focused on the homework. But what you're going to be doing is, I kind of put a little bit of that little teaser there in the chat, is you guys are going to be thinking of how can I be an important role in the solution. So I want you to really think about what are the solutions to some of the things, and I want you to find something you're interested in, and you're going to be doing a research project. So it's going to be a project on thinking about the solution and how we can make it a reality. So we're trying to turn this big thing into something that's feasible, something that we can actually do, and we can do it together. We can do it individually, but we have real solutions, concrete, something we can touch, right? It's not abstract. So we're moving from these big problems that seem so abstract into something that's tangible. Does that make sense? So you're really going to be thinking about in this video, whether it's soil, whether it's, there's a lot of things I talk about from the, Russian olive, right? Like it's something like, hey, I can plant a pollinator garden at my house. So you want to plant a pollinator garden to bring back butterflies. That could be a solution, right? So we're going to be thinking about some of those solutions. And then next week, we're going to really look at where your interest is. So with that, because this video is 24 minutes long, I want to give you guys enough time to watch it. And since Sarah's going to be screen sharing, I'm going to hand it over to her. So I am going to leave you guys early, but please email me if you have any further questions. And Sarah will share information out with me later. And wish me luck, you all, as I have to go facilitate another meeting with adults and tell them why they need
to care. Poor thing. She's
to care about this
forever.
Yeah, so I'm going to go talk to adults about why they need to care about these things. So thank you all. So I'm going to give you
Allison.
a hug, and I'll see you guys again next week.
We'll see you next week. All right, guys. So I've got the video. It's just the third episode of the videos we've been watching. So I probably can't type in the definitions as we go along because I'm probably not talented enough to do the video and stopping it and typing in the definitions, but I'll try to pause it to make sure that everybody has time to catch the definitions as we move along. Let me screen share for you guys really quick. Right. Everybody should see it. You guys are good? You can see it, right? All right, cool.
Hi everybody, I'm Erin from Ciudad Soil and Water Conservation District, and I'm here with Allison today, who is from Valencia Soil and Water Conservation District. We're at Whitfield Wildlife Conservation Area, and we've been talking to you a lot about the riparian ecosystem, the river that we live by, the Rio Grande, and the flooding that occurs and are used to occur a lot more, and the changes that have happened because of humans. And so I came down here to visit Allison and learn more about Whitfield Wildlife Conservation Area. And so Allison, could you tell me just a little bit about what you do here, what you teach people about?
Absolutely. So Whitfield is a great place to learn about the riparian habitat because it's actually in the riparian habitat. And Whitfield is a nice place to look at flooding, to look at plants and animals and different places that they live in. It's a great place where habitat has been created. So some of the things that I like to do here at Whitfield is to show those different habitats through different activities. We work with many different grade levels, and we kind of look at those and then think about the important changes that are happening now and into the future. So this is a great place to really see habitat in action.
Ooh, habitat in action. I like that. So I'm curious, when we talk about habitat in action, what is happening right now? I mean, I know that this isn't a perfect situation here. We probably have some human impacts that occur on this site. what are some of those human impacts?
Absolutely. So some things that the kids always point out right away is our visitor center building, which is just on the other side of us here. And of course, you may hear those cars in the background.
Yep.
So we see the roads, we see a lot of power lines. We even see a ditch on our way in here. And even this path that we're on here is a human impact. And so even though we're restoring habitat here at Whitfield through our 100 acres, we still see and need human impacts, and we'll talk about some of those and see some of those as we make our journey around this area.
Awesome. I'm really excited to see this space. Let's get started.
All right.
So Allison, in our last 2 videos, we talked a lot using that model on the ground about the river and the historical changes that have happened to it, like how we've controlled it with dams and levees and jetty jacks to kind of stop the flooding because it was flooding into communities and creating a problem. But as we know, flooding is really important for this riparian ecosystem. A lot of the plants and animals depend on it. So, you know, one thing that's related to is groundwater, right? Can you talk a little bit about what that relationship is?
Absolutely. So since we don't have any natural flooding here anymore, these plants and animals depend on that groundwater for the plants to grow and thrive here. And so the groundwater needs to be really close to the surface here. And so we want to know how close it is and how that's changed over time. So something that we like to do is track that data. And we have this well right here that actually does just that.
Wow.
And so when we open up our well here, we have this kind of this long stick here that actually will measure the groundwater on how low it is from where it's at here at the surface. So if we stick this in here, we would actually get about 4 to 5 feet below the surface, which means we'll find water about 4 to 5 feet, which is not that far. But we need that to be at that level for these plants and animals to grow here.
Right.
And I always ask the kids, where's the river from here? About maybe
that way.
2 miles that way, right? Well, the answer is actually 4 to 5 feet below our feet. And we can actually see that water if you look behind me at this pond here. So what we've done here, Erin, is we've dug a giant hole, and that hole has filled in with that groundwater. So that's an indication that it's about 4 to 5 feet below the surface.
So this is actually water from the river.
Yes.
Because that's what all these plants are tapping into as well, is the water that's underground comes from the river.
Yes, and it's really nice because it also has created habitat since we brought it up to the surface. So we have that groundwater brought up to the surface here to create even more habitat for our plants and animals to thrive in this environment.
That's awesome. You know, one thing I love about wetlands or pond areas is they're really good for helping to clean water, right? They help that system. It's like a natural kind of filter for water. So it helps with water quality too.
Absolutely. And that water quality, we have some great plants and animals that we see at this pond year round.
I'm going to stop you real quick. Has anyone ever been to Whitfield before? Anyone on the class? No.
I have.
Jackson, you have? Faith, you have?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, awesome. So Faith, you weren't here last week. Jackson, I know you were, but we were talking about maybe trying to put together a group trip where all of us that are in this class could potentially visit Whitfield together. So it'll be after the series is over, but I will stay in communication with you guys and we'll see if we can get a trip out there. All right, I'm going to start it back again.
So Allison, this is a wildlife conservation area, right? That means that you're creating habitat to help animals live here and have space to be where they need to be, right? And so I'm seeing like this might be one kind of habitat. You might have different habitats in different areas. Can you talk about some of the animals that do live here and use this space as a habitat?
Absolutely, and we see many different animals throughout the year here. And one of my favorite things to do is to have the students list some of the animals that they may see at different times of the year depending on when they're here. So right now we're here in the winter time, right? So it's a little quieter, a little colder, but we still see animals in this area. But some of the animals that we see throughout the year would be coyotes and cottontail rabbits and prairie dogs. We saw a lot of those holes as we were walking over here.
Yeah, in the ground.
In the ground, absolutely. And some smaller animals, we'll see some snakes, and we'll see some lizards. And of course, next to the pond, we'll see a lot of turtles. We'll see a lot of bullfrogs, and of course a lot of birds. And the birds like to kind of hover around these cattails. So this is a great habitat for cattails as well. As you can see behind me, we have a lot of trees. So we have a lot of cottonwood trees that the birds like to sit in. And also we have this bat box that we've built here for habitat as well, to even bring bats in. And of course we can't forget about the fish, right? Yes, so we have habitat for even fish here throughout the year. And so this is a great place for a diversity of plants and animals to kind of take advantage of this pond and some of the plants around it.
Awesome. You know, when I got here, I heard a lot of those big birds circling around overhead. What are those guys?
So those are our migratory birds. Those are called Sandhill Cranes.
Oh, yeah.
And we get a lot of Sandhill Cranes at Whitfield. And we'll see them here by the pond, but actually behind us, we'll see a lot of those Sandhill Cranes feasting on some of these grasses. And we'll take a look at the saltgrass meadow. They like to feast on that grass as well. So we have habitat for birds here at the pond as well as in the conservation area. And cranes are one of my favorites because they're here during this time of year.
All right, Allison, you just took me a little bit off trail. We kind of headed north of the pond, and now we're in this kind of middle-aged forest. What are we doing here? What's this place about?
Right, so this is our Candy Cordova Trail. This is kind of our forest area of the riparian habitat here at Whitfield. And I like this area because we can really see many different kinds of trees. So in the wintertime, we can't really see what kind of trees these are unless we really look at the leaves that have fallen down. And so some of the trees that we have here are going to be the cottonwoods, which we saw at the pond. We also have, so you can tell because there's a lot of cottonwood leaves here that have fallen on the ground. And so we know we have a lot of cottonwood trees here. We also have a New Mexico olive, which is a common riparian shrub tree. We also have desert willows, which are really common. And we have screwbean mesquites that have these really cool seed pods.
Yeah, the chic.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's a nice diversity of life here with many different kinds of trees that make up this area. And that also helps create a healthy ecosystem. When you have that diversity of life and trees, that brings in a diversity of animals as well.
Awesome. Are those trees you labeled mostly native species?
Absolutely. So we do have a lot of native, which means they're from here.
Right.
And we do have some non-native species like the Russian olive and the salt cedar here at Whitfield. And those are good for habitat as well, but they can become invasive. And we talked a little bit about invasive species in our last video.
Right.
So
they can take over and
absolutely
get real dense.
So one of the things that we try to do here is to take out some of those invasive species and replace them and plant some of these native species. And in this area, we've had thousands of these different kinds of trees planted to create this forest.
Wow. Wow, who did all that planting?
People? All volunteers.
Cool.
Yeah, all volunteers of the area helped recreate. So that's one of the ways that we are restoring this area.
Awesome, awesome. But did we talked about restoration a little bit, but maybe we didn't explain what it is. Can you explain what it is? What does it mean to restore something?
Absolutely. So to restore means to bring it back to a healthy state.
Okay.
So when we say restore riparian, we can't restore it to what it used to be. Remember how the river used to flood?
Yeah.
We don't have that natural flooding here anymore. And we'll look at that when we talk about soil here in a minute. But because we don't have that, we try our best to restore the habitat to what it can be with the resources that we do have. Yeah, so it's restoring it, putting it back to a healthy state to bring in new life and new growth.
Cool. That's awesome. All right, Allison, well, you were just talking a little bit about restoration and, you know, healthy habitat. Well, often I hear people talking about soil as an important part of the ecosystem, but we don't always give it a lot of attention because we just don't see it as much as maybe a big tree. But what role does soil play in this ecosystem, and how are you guys helping to restore it as well?
Absolutely. So soil is kind of the backbone of all of this. So we need our soil to be healthy for our plants to be healthy.
Yeah.
And we can tell that we have healthy soil in this place that we're at right here. So one thing that's a product of healthy soil are healthy plants and a diversity of plants. So behind you here, we have a New Mexico olive.
Oh.
Now you can't tell in the wintertime, but if we look on the ground, we can see the leaves, and that's what helps give it away that it's a New Mexico olive, because the leaves are really small, they're very tiny, they're long. So that would be a leaf from a New Mexico olive. And that's a native plant, very healthy. And over here we have a big cottonwood tree, and as we can tell on the ground, we got a lot of those cottonwood leaves here. So we have a cottonwood tree, and then right here, right next to me, we have a sheep willow. And if you look closely, you can still kind of see some of those leaves here on the willow. And the leaves look similar to our New Mexico olive, very long and narrow, but all very healthy to the environment. And a lot of animals eat the leaves. And so not only are these trees great for the soil, but they're good for the animals as well. So one thing we need is we need healthy soil. And healthy soil depends on a lot of factors, but there's one big factor. So what's in soil, right? You need to have water, you need to have air, you need to have lots of minerals, but most of...
In case anybody wanted that, I tried to pause it while it was still on the screen. In case you care about those percentages.
3.
Importantly, you need organic matter.
Okay, yeah.
And that's what we have a lot of here, which causes this healthy environment where we're standing. So organic matter is is a biotic product, right? So do you remember what biotic means, right?
Right.
You guys remember what biotic means?
Living?
Living, yes. So we need 5% of our soil to be living. And the living things in the soil are going to be organic matter from plants, the decomposition of plants, such as right here, you can see the leaves.
Yeah.
So this leaf cover, or some people call it mulch, kind of holds in that water. So you want water in your soil, but they all...
Again, just so you guys can take notes really quick, if anyone wants to write that down. It's going a little fast, so I thought I would stop.
also decompose and add that organic matter to the soil as well.
Like nutrients, right?
Nutrients. So also composting would be something that people do to have their vegetables grow healthier in their garden.
Yeah.
So that decomposition of all of those fruits and all of those banana peels and everything else that you throw in there to make your compost, that adds healthy organic matter. Here in front of you, Erin, we have more coyote scat. So scat will naturally decompose. So if we were to say, is scat biotic or abiotic, we know that it's biotic because it came from a living animal.
Wow.
So we have scat which slowly decomposes as well. So having a diversity of plants and materials on the ground that will help decompose and hold in moisture help add the nutrients and organic matter to our soil. Because naturally that flooding and erosion would change out our soil, but we don't have that flooding here anymore. So we depend on healthy plants, and we depend on something covering that soil to hold in that moisture.
That's interesting, Allison, because I noticed when we were out on the road that we were standing on, which didn't have compost or mulch on top of it, and then you don't see as many diverse plants around. Is that because there's not enough of a variety of nutrients in the soil?
Absolutely. So we need that diversity, and when we cut those plants down and remove that natural organic matter, that soil doesn't have the health to that cycle. And so one plant actually does grow in really poor soil, and those are noxious weeds, we call them. Weeds like kochia.
I think we all know what goat heads are, because that's not even funny. They're the worst, right?
They
Definitely.
hurt so bad.
They hurt so bad. And they don't even hurt like momentarily. They hurt for such a long time after you step on them. So, you know, it's like it might be one of the worst things about living in New Mexico is the goat heads.
It's because there's poison in them.
Yeah, it's true. You are correct. It is because there is poison in them, and they will continually release that poison, and it's not beautiful. It hurts so bad. All right, I'm gonna unmute her. I know we're like close to 10. Oh, go ahead, Jackson.
I'll let my dogs out, and 5 minutes later, they'll come in, and they'll have like 5 goat heads in each paw.
I know. That's how I know our dog's got one, is one will be limping on his leg in the backyard because he's got one stuck in his paw. I do want to acknowledge that it is 10 o'clock. So if you guys have to go, you can always finish the recording later, but we have, you know, just a few minutes left in the video. So if you have time, stick around and we'll just finish it up. Okay.
Or tumbleweeds, or those goat heads that you find in your shoes. Those weeds, we find so many of them because we have that poor soil that just doesn't have that organic matter to keep it healthy. So it's kind of the backbone to creating this healthy riparian ecosystem.
Awesome. So looking around, we have evidence above ground of healthy soil below ground.
Absolutely.
Very cool. So we've just been walking along this beautiful site. It's just so nice to be out in this space right now. And I heard lots of birds chirping along the way, saw these flocks of birds flying in together. There's definitely a lot of signs of wildlife in this area. So can you talk a little bit about this space and how it's different maybe from the other places that we were in already?
Absolutely. So one of the big things that we try to do here at Whitfield is we try to have different spaces to kind of get a more diversity of animals that kind of pass through this area.
Because different animals like different things, right? They need different kinds of shelter or food.
Absolutely. And so we're kind of trying to not only recreate that plant habitat that we talked about, we're also trying to recreate our animal habitat. And so since Whitfield is only 100 acres, we really try our hardest to kind of use the land in different ways to bring in many different kinds of animals.
Cool.
So an example, to this side, we have what we call our wet moist soil unit. And so we actually flood this. So you can see we have this ditch right here. So we'll open it up and we'll flood this area. So we have that nice lush grass. We'll even get some cattails will grow here. And we have an abundance of cottonwood trees. And so we get all kinds of different birds and even owls that come through this area. So this is a great habitat for our migratory birds and birds that we have year round. It's also a great habitat for rabbits as they can hide in that really tall, lush grass.
Yeah, I see that grass is really thick.
So it's a really great habitat for many different kinds of animals. And then over here, as we were talking about cranes earlier. So we have a lot of cover crop and we have a saltgrass meadow, and we always try to keep that soil covered.
One more definition for you guys. What is a cover crop?
For the health of our soil, but also our animals like to come and eat the grass, eat the seeds, so we try to have a cover crop year round. So we have giant, kind of, we call them food plots here at Whitfield. So we have giant areas of space with no plants, and then we have areas with lots of plants. And this was all purposefully done to get an abundance of different animals here as well.
Interesting. So you're growing food, but not for humans, for wildlife.
For wildlife, yes. Everything here is for wildlife, and to really, as we talked about, to really restore this area into the future.
Because what was this place before?
So this was actually an old dairy,
Oh.
and so we're still kind of using some of those man-made water sources to actually water our fields. So you can see kind of that old usage, but we're just kind of now turning into what we call a conservation area.
Awesome. So Allison, you know, after we toured this area and really thought about what does it mean to restore it, what are some of the things that you're doing to help bring this land back to a healthy state? What are some things that students or people that may not have an area like this to work with, what can they do to kind of help, you know, do that kind of restoration on a smaller scale in, say, their neighborhood or where they live, or I don't know.
Absolutely. And so one of the big things here at Whitfield that we try to do is we try to show our students and our community members things that they can do and think about in their own homes. So some ways that students and community members could get involved is planting some of those native plants that we talked about, like the cottonwood trees or the New Mexico olives or the screwbean mesquites. So some of those, especially if you live in a riparian habitat, planting those will add that diversity to the soil and bring up more kinds of those plants. So something simple as planting native species is something that we could do. And just planting plants in general, right? Bringing more oxygen back to our air, and so our air is healthier as well.
What if you're a student or someone that lives maybe in like an apartment complex, or you don't have a lot of land to kind of plant things on?
So it's also great to go out and track things and track changes over time.
Oh.
So something kids can do is just get outside and look at the trees around you and wonder what trees those are, why they're planted there, and look at those changes, especially the deciduous trees that lose their leaves in the wintertime, and to see when they're losing their leaves and when those changes are happening. So tracking changes in the environment is one of the most important things we can do.
Just popping in really quick. This goes right back to, remember when Fiona introduced that to you guys at the very beginning of our classes too, some tracking opportunities, and we can resend that information, but that's something that you can do as well to contribute to helping to regenerate these populations.
Do as people and as scientists.
That's awesome. I imagine they could draw. Sometimes I like try to get out and draw things.
Yes, nature journaling, we call that.
Yeah, to bring more awareness.
Yes,
to it.
And even just educating. So once we look and notice changes and think about questions we have, as scientists and as students, because we're all scientists, right? The best thing we can do is to educate others and to communicate some of these important things so we can make big changes on a large scale.
I think that's really important, Allison. I know that in New Mexico, a lot of people live with different generations in their family. So no matter what generation you are, if you educate your family, you're helping different generations understand this knowledge too, and that might help us, you know, protect this land for a long time. Because without habitat, without plants and animals, it's not going to be a really wonderful place for humans either, right? So
absolutely,
in the long term,
it's a giant cycle, and it's always neat to look at those different components of that cycle. And as we've been exploring how that has changed over time and what we can do about some of those changes.
Well, it's really neat to see what you're doing here for the future of a riparian ecosystem like this bosque, the habitat by the river, and I think that it's just been a really great thing to learn about, so thank you.
Then thank you so much, and thank you all for joining us, and I can't wait to see some of the projects that you
All right, guys, I'm gonna stop screen share. I'm gonna bring us back to a large group, and I'm not gonna keep you for much longer other than to start thinking about what it is that you want to focus on to try to make a difference on. And we are, just like we always do with homework, we're gonna send out an email with a little more detail because we are gonna meet the three of us, Fiona, myself, and Miss Allison tomorrow, to kind of go over how we really want you guys to sum this up. Next week is not really going to be a class per se, rather it's going to be your opportunity to share what you're really passionate about, okay, what you really want to make a difference on, what your plan is moving forward. Okay, so but look for the email. You'll have more details. We'll line it out all for you guys so you know exactly what to do. And then don't forget to take pictures of your projects if you want us to share them, because they're amazing. I'm so proud of you guys. Does anyone have any questions? Anything you need from me before we head out for the day? No, not seeing any questions. All right, guys, that's it. It's 10:10 almost. It took you for 10 minutes longer than I was supposed to. Jackson's cat is adorable. We all love cats. And if you need me, you have my email address. You have Miss Allison's email address. You guys have a good rest of your week, a wonderful weekend. Get outside, pay attention, do some nature journaling. You know, we're a part of Nature Niños too, and Nature Niños has their 52 weeks of nature challenge where we're challenging you to get out every week and do some nature journaling. And so we're posting this week's new prompt today. As soon as I hang up, I'm going to get that posted. So that can kind of help, you know, get your mind thinking about different ways to see nature, to experience nature, because really nature journaling is extremely important. Okay, you guys have a good rest of your day. We'll talk to you later. Yeah, you're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Bye, guys. See you later.